Welcome to r/entitled parents, where a family gets completely ripped apart over a baby name. Our next Reddit post is a cross post from r/am I the butthole. Am I the butthole for breaking my fiance's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? I'm a 27-year-old woman and my fiance is 27. We have a 2-month-old son. We're overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision that we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name, let's say Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiance's oldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get his name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and I would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future kids Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of whatever name we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called me to offer their condolences. Then, my mother-in-law asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake and had no obligation to keep it now that she'd passed. My family agrees that while it's true that we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiance agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last week of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of my fiance's family hadn't wanted to name their sons Peter, but they did it anyway for family's sake. They said our decision was selfish and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not. It just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and my uncle's memories to even consider using that name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiance's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiance and his family. My fiance assures me that he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. OP, this is so weird, especially since your fiance's family admits they don't even like their tradition, but they're doing it because they have to. But if you don't like their tradition, just stop. Just stop. It's really that simple. And how are they getting angry at your family for not moving on? Meanwhile, they have a 7-generation-old family tradition. Talk about not moving on. Give me a break. Then, 1 week later, OP posted an update. About a week after my post, my fiance's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and they truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but we invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed that neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't want to point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiance and his parents. One day, my fiance was helping my father-in-law with something at our place, so my mother-in-law and I went to the park with the baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, my mother-in-law was sitting on a park bench chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as, "Son's name's Mom," and the woman said, "I thought his name was Peter." I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiance about what had happened. The moment we got home, my fiance kicked both of his parents out of our place. My fiance had read my text and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar and confessed immediately. Apparently, both of my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on a few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think that they're in the right. We're heartbroken, especially my fiancé. Not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to both of us. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. But now, all my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they do not deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson, because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their butts. Then, 2 months later, OP posted an update. We're still no contact with my fiancé's parents. We both blocked them everywhere. My fiancé's relatives who were on our side still are, and most of the ones who weren't haven't come around. If anything, they're even more pissed now. I remember someone suggesting that my fiancé's family might stop using the name after we decided not to, and you were right. Last week, one of my fiancé's cousins announced that she was pregnant with a boy. She included her baby's name in the announcement, and it's not Peter. What followed was a string of aggressive Instagram DMs from both my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. They both created accounts for the sole purpose of contacting me. They sent me almost an hour's worth of voice messages about how I'd ruined their family. They said they wished their son had never met me, and he'd see me for who I truly am, and that I'd never gotten pregnant. Many of the messages ended with, "I hope you're happy now," as if they thought they were getting the last word, only to think of something else they wanted to say. There was name-calling, an accusation of cheating, and the persistent refusal to refer to my son as their grandchild. My fiancé and I listened to the messages together. He hasn't gotten any messages from them. As much as I tried to distance myself, I was in tears by the time that it was all done. I still don't regret anything, especially after the stunt they pulled back in May, but I'm not completely free of the guilt yet. Not to mention their complete disregard for their grandson. I must have spent close to an hour sobbing in my fiancé's arms. Once I was calmer, he unblocked his parents just to scream at them for a while. I only heard his side of the conversation, but it was more than enough. He finished the call by saying that he didn't want to hear from them again. We had a long talk afterwards. My fiancé opened up about the emotional blackmail by his family before and after my pregnancy. My in-laws were threatening him with anything they could if we didn't name our son Peter. I told him about my guilt and how awful I feel for putting him through this. We reassured each other, cried a bit more, and had a mostly pleasant evening with our baby. We contacted his cousin. The family is also giving her drama for breaking the tradition again. They're being way less aggressive though, and I think that many of my in-laws are finally learning to let go. We're not expecting any apologies anytime soon, but we'll be glad if they come. Wait, hold up. If they were threatening your fiancé before and during the pregnancy, that means that they lied to your face when they said that they accepted the exception they were making for your grandma, and secretly they were planning on, blackmailing/threatening you the second that baby popped out. Yo, these in-laws are nuts. Imagine cutting both your son and your grandson out of your lives forever just because of a stupid name. Our next Reddit post is from Suzanne Salty Seas. I had the seat 1A booked on both of my flights. Yeah, I got a deal on first class and flew sitting in the first seat on the plane. I was thrilled. On my first flight, I had great seatmates. On my second flight, I had problematic people. I boarded and got on my seat. A few minutes later, a couple with the husband wearing a Berkeley sweatshirt and jeans and a wife dressed in designer duds got on and started immediately insisting that I was sitting in one of their assigned seats. They had tickets for 1B and 1C and insisted that 1A was the aisle seat. I told them that they're wrong. I pointed to the sign showing which seat was which. They got the flight attendant, who confirmed that I was in the right seat and they were in the middle seat in the aisle seat, not me. Copacetic, right? Nope. They started complaining to the flight attendants that I was too fat and crowding the husband. I may be fluffy, but I can fit in the seat easily on a regular flight, much less these wide ones. Also, I can put on a seatbelt just fine and pull it in some. I was not spilling over into his seat. The flight attendants moved them into the seats right behind me. So I ended up with a full empty 3 oversized seats. I made sure to stretch out over all three and take the most glorious and petty power nap of all time. They moaned about how unfair it was, how I should have never been allowed to sit near them, how I should have been moved, etc. This is why it pays to be nice to others, even others you don't particularly like much. Those two sat crowded in with someone else who was quite fluffy, ignored by the flight attendants while I lolled around napping. I take napping oh so seriously. I think they must have exhibited the same very bad attitude going through customs because I passed them having their baggage pulled apart and expected while a custom agent grilled them. Karma's real. Still laughing thinking about it. Our next Reddit post is from BJ. So, I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I was sitting on a bench finishing my lunch break when a random woman came and sat next to me on the bench. She had a toddler in a stroller. I'm getting up to walk away and she says, "Excuse me, could you just watch my child for 2 minutes while I pop in the shop? It's really hard to get my stroller in there." I felt kind of bad, so I said, "Sorry, I'm just going back to work. But this is a fairly safe area, so maybe you can keep the buggy outside and bring the kid with you?" The shopkeeper could keep an eye on the buggy through the window. She looks at me and says in a really mean tone, "But you only work just next door. I can tell from your lanyard. It only takes a couple of minutes." I just said sorry and walked away because I was literally 2 minutes away from the end of my lunch break. The entitled parent said, "You probably would have upset him anyway with the state of you." I didn't respond and kept walking away, but it made me feel bad. And on top of that, I would have genuinely not minded helping if it wasn't for the fact that A, I would have had someone breathing down my neck for being late off my break. And B, I know the shopkeeper in this area well, and I've seen countless people leave pushchairs, mobility scooters, etc. outside. Yeah, in addition to this woman just being entitled, it doesn't even make any sense. Watch the stroller. Why? Because you're worried about strangers, but you're entrusting it to a stranger. They're all strangers, lady. Our next Reddit post is from Willing Noise. My in-laws are suing me for part of ownership in my company. This just happened today when I was served with papers. My husband and I, both males, had issues with them a while back, which resulted in us going no contact. I've had my restaurant since I was in my 20s, long before my husband was ever in my life. My in-laws felt that after we got married, it became a family business and they were entitled to ownership. My husband and I have a prenup and a postnup that states that my husband and his family have no stake in the business. And I am the sole owner, and they know this and have known this. This issue caused us to go no contact with his family because of their entitled greed. My husband is beyond pissed, and my lawyer is assuring me that they'll lose. For some reason, I'm laughing about it. Just one more headache I don't need. Man, I'm not a lawyer, but this just sounds idiotic. Even if you don't have a prenup and a postnup, which you do, so it's kind of irrelevant, but even if you didn't, you're married to your husband, not to them, so how does that make it their property? What a bunch of morons. All they're gonna accomplish is having to pay their lawyer and your lawyer. That was r/entitled parents. And if you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.